Yes, so like definitely my procedure is right now just how being a tiny thing on the ground like but the burning that definitely will be like actually to extent of like how the secondly is my procedure because that the throat form of that I'm looking at that tiny thing on like the ground will be only that is somehow of the hub that in actually I'm looking at the hub being like an extremely huge and giant not this kind of like plant and it would be only that more shorter scale that would be that small thing on like the ground doesn't look like a place in the step of like the more portion of that monster of giant plant would be that thing on like the ground is that right now school and my and all of them not feel might be like the case because actually my consider so that right now with like them trying to set fire on it like number like right as like they will be about to set fire like number that anything on the ground expanding this one of the which will be like the amount of land like so like expanding and trying to like attack all of them and trying to take up into like multi-flag scenario that we develop, right? So but member that kind of like it to be like an ambush kind of like a scenario where like neither steel nor might no anyone would be expecting such a scenario to happen. So like that sort of leave such amount of openings kind of like a product mouth opening kind of like an attack amount that how most this plan is of it what let that with the generic that in the variant and maybe that's been or like one moment of that the bring that getting caught in that thing kind of that thing of like that plan of that moment so I understand person understand the others struggling to that phase that person who do that cost in that mode of that channel of plan so that thing the scenario that I'm looking for like so that I'm looking for that person who be getting caught I'm looking for maybe being might or that I'm looking that person maybe getting caught to be either might or that doesn't reflect the scenario parents and the person trying to be trying to like through the final the sale custom before like that most was client solo so that the scenario that up the table like so and that they going to be my taking the reimbursement the thing at that point is to be the struggle for like again to like free that one of and like again to getting caught in that whole team, that whole mountain that team of that giant monster kind plant, which I was putting that to be like would be hiding underground in that hub area. It doesn't be that the scenario that I'm looking at, and that to free that person that will be getting caught by the plant and like that would be a serious puzzle. And I'm looking that to free that person be like a single creative hub. And that itself, that alone, like I'm spending with the fact that I will be like taking up a lot of time and will be making it impossible for them to like actually set fire to that plant. So it's like the scenario that I'm looking for. So like while they will be struggling, so like my going to reimburse the plan, like and so the struggle in the situation, I'm looking at definitely will be like feel that will be like pulling the person that will be getting caught staying left by that plant. Hospital plan that like the hub plan that was scenario that so this feel that will be like pulling that person and trying to like save that person while skill to stay away because algorithm maybe given that the orders of like orders to that Robert maybe look at them the skill that attack like that monster plan with that any weapon like item that they can find so like so that maybe definitely I'm looking at skills like that before that they would have brought it with them so like I'm thinking that maybe that's in that attacking that monster plan like nothing or my or the fundamentals of like attacking that monster plan with that spiky space for that as well as like I'm looking at double the because and that double that can quite see would be like frustrated and like say that person that would be caught by that one plan like the other to see that constantly attacking that one plan trying to that they free and save be for them to do like free and save that person that would be caught by the plan it's like the scenario that I'm so like this number from that is literally happening and like initially I'm looking at that only regarding like the shadow of the state experience to the point where like especially because of like the how game so it's in the story like the shadow of the blues like in my personal reaction like the wine from that the case is the thing that and available of so the thing that not for to like spread and take over of it like doing that with that wine like which like the happiness the wine has been is like the shadow of the control it to that spread and take over of it initially and that wine will be able to have a distant range limit and this would be this arrangement it would be the reason for like the creation of like the hub as well. The way my book is going to bring the hub to be like a giant plan like monster like anything that would be where like these wines from like the gate would be joining up and from and that to be like the shadow of the constantly creating this like hub that monster's plan which has that which will be having that power to that create its own wine. So, like that way different from that monster's plan how like new sets of wines will be like spread out through that through how which is like the scenario that I'm looking that way in order for like to select paper, which like the shadow monster select of the authentic, whether it's like through out like when that like the brown hopping or to take off like the entire like the human world, a real human world, as well as the creation of like the creation of underground hub would be absolutely necessary, and that's the only way for like the wines to be able to like spread all up through a take or like when down to host the real world. Might be due to that range limit situation, might be the case, which actually might be the range of that building on. So definitely different that things that way. So that things that way have would be such an extremely crucial and important uh, thing for like the shadow wonder and definitely something that has like the skin and that level would be attacked like with that spiky baseball bat and other items that they will be fighting in that underground surface that when also maybe like attacking that giant plant monster kind of a thing that was scenario that and at that point, so like the shadow monster, like normally getting on being on height enough and like getting your trigger and that straight the organ but the in gap was like some of the not only in that the real world outside of like problem lab in like the posting and the real world in like the round but like also that all the places on the thing like currently in like problems lab as well number different like them all being given the order by like the shadow monster straight away go to like the like the like the scenario that well, and definitely I'm going like by the time like skills and group would you find free that one person and there can to be get upon to will be getting caught by the plan sponsor like I'm different the hub plan also by the time they will be finally succeeding in like bring that person and looking at so much of time would have lost to the point where like I'm thinking that by the time they will be bring and save that person that they will be surrounded by like the entire fleet army of like they monster who has all of their from all the different paths leading to like the hub except for that single path through which lab speed and all of them had made it to that the hub with like the scenario that I'm going to surround it. And by then I'm looking at the hub motor maybe taking to the extent that there is as well with like the constant spiking of that line ones of the black spiky this was that and everything. Also like an scenario. So like at that point so like at that point I'm looking for that one that speed and also will be surrounded by that so this great cool like so this was like at that point like my devil stuff of this idea to that so before like the faceless models would be able to definitely get to it, attacking them and eliminating them that for them to that swing with all their might and attack and try to then destroy like that giant plan monster like so now the let them like keep attacking like the plan monster and like at that point of view, like under the left each twin as well under the left the great army of basic monsters as well would be given affected to a certain extent because of my secondary impression that like the hub would be that essential element that even allows it wouldn't just splitting the micro invention that like it wouldn't be just connected to like the spreading of minds due to like the range limit being possible through like hub alone that would be like the only this behind like the hubs for like the shadow monster, but also like the controlling of that like works with for like the shadow monster from like the bad world towards like so this great partners like this in like the real world that has been things possible for like the shadow monster will be also solely due to like the something of this like up so definitely my secondary answer. So like definitely the more like Mike and Steve and also just doing it hub like something that even though by then like the big favorite of that surrounded by that the great army of like was going up from each of the path leading to that like on the these things that they would be doing like that giant hub land monster like in the that so basis monster will be getting up at that like that control that of like the shadow of the or this great army of like big monster wavering with like each strike that she and those will be landing at like the plan monster like the scenario and we get like the plan monster will be so giant and extremely tough as well. Like the scenario challenging and I'm still thinking remember the game so that like still even then like after the point like I want things to be really hopeless like it will be at that point that I'm looking for like from like that path that path leading to the up process to another had made it to like up I'm looking at that point to me going up. That's the scenario that I was definitely I'm still thinking of my brain this is that like believe might have woken up without actually like within an hour of such like Billy might have woken up due to like Billy's stuff maybe might be scenario that I don't have so definitely then that Billy one thing absolutely no one wasn't at that point at that Will's home that Billy might have straight away decided to that might have also noticed that like the car missing at the kid's home. So that Billy might have straight away pushed the road, took to the road into the car and Billy might have straight away noticed that for the destruction that public property destruction that like Matthew might have consistently created along the that path that you had like with like skill and also like the scenario there. So like it would be just like one that single discussion that was like a bit of like the public property like nothing is trying to cover like for like the entirety of like that part of that that right like you might have unfortunately like due to her lack of that mindset might have uh, ended up that creating like destruction of like public property kind of like a pub leading to like exact location like the function to or yeah, the door to the ground to like the upside down through which like you and all from made it to like the scenario like that way to be at that point and that's the situation that the most unnecessary scenario happening was like to be at that point making it towards the and feel it already confused me to on the first time important first time like on seeing that stuff played out underground played out something exactly but like that's not even more confused at that point on making it to like that on actively making it to like for sublocation at that point and seeing all this great seeing that matching as well as seeing and all of them like attacking with like plant giants plant most of like thing and with like just create number of basic models of like or like so close to them just create armor like basic models or showing up from that or just create number of leading to that something or like you will only getting scared at that point and like you will totally trying to save himself and escape. But like at that point, itself, like from that very part, it was like to do this model plan for the project to be that trying to like escape and then that very same to be like return that scare to like the hub later. And I'm looking at that point, they were willing to do that. Like if we want to live, then like if we like destroy this like plan monster will be destroy this plan monster will be this things will be down the line will be failing to be and like something like really at that point like pulling away like snatching away that like spicy taste for that speed at that point. And I'm looking to believe that and at that point I'm looking like all those three armies Facebook motion will be almost about to land their attack on Philly and all of them at the same time and eliminate them attack at the price for like all three armies that they were to land their attack like Philly like taking that final swing with that baseball bat with all of such in might and that final swing that I'm looking at that plan monster like totally that getting eliminated. It's like the scenario that I was for essentially like all of that stuff. So essentially at that point, like the shadow motor will be extremely enraged because like essentially like the shadow motor will be permanently losing that control it has over that or like the vines as well as over like all those great of this motors like and even then like on the attack. Even once like all those faceless motors will be coming back to the offensive, like on seeing that really and all of them all those things like companies that will create like this one is still that still working towards and trying to that attack them like on their own with like the scenario that yeah like at that point that definitely one of the biggest monsters that so setting out and out so and basically that with and that basic monster would be that single basis monster would be able to dig up that all the other great number of basis monsters that we person and that basis monster will be tough and we start that way seeing the steps and along with all of us, and they will not straight away during the command to all the intensive like the army and security is not right. At that point, I'm pushing dark becoming the leader of like that group army that with this monster and that way dark saving the state. Solely little like custom problems the black so and so and all of them that can more we say this that and due to that complexity in that one thing was that in that and dark that way that stuff totally given the command and fair like something and all of that like at that point. This next thing is not if putting on board and method doing. And at that point I'm developing that George actually book like George Nancy and John contributing that like was their effort of that basically using that fire and frame and like the people that both of them that had like save find it save and create using their right to go along the line that goes up the left and one and then they were doing at that point which like I was like they will have to usually finding out the truth at that point that like it was true that the they are in about of like sustainability and even to the end for all of them that they are in about and like through them destroying like plant like half month that was like the solar report for like with they getting saved and with doing sales from that and all of like the channel of yeah it's what I'm going to point to believe that Joseph Philip that we then the on that will be finding out by the time that it's a group of that Steve and like Mike and also as well again making it back together so along with like the other so like 7 scenario that I'm looking for at that point and then the Okay, so that's definitely my question right now was that the shadow monster right now intensifying its like control power build and that build right now shocking there is like that's liberating right now for that scenario to do that like right now I'm looking at that without like difficulty maybe I'm looking at that the of Steve Mike and other like managing to that ignite and destroy that tiny hub and then maybe nothing more happening there and there's that certain question of like that tiny hub I'm looking at that will totally bring like that control of like the channel of the floor will like instantly that channel of the looking control all of it and at that point like solely due to that due to like the and all of them showing that up alone that they would just survive like the scenario. So like my personal reason right now was that the shadow of the controlling build right now. So I think there's like a right now that no matter what like Jonathan and Nancy in his own text that I'm going right now for like Jonathan and like Nancy using all of that strength to that free build of choice from the tip of Joyce, but like I'm doing regardless of that thing. Even Jonathan and be using all of the strength to like to let go of that build that skills that was strength of will through that kind of like the shadow because it's so much experience that like no matter what long and to be going like I'm doing that will then not to like let go that it's like the scenario that I'm doing that will goes on the on the verge of like the eliminated like the scenario that I'm expecting as that goes to be almost about to get eliminated and that very now the second thing when that kind of like the ignition of like the hub by the global structure and seeing and also happening and at that point I was slowly do that act of that rocket arrow that composition that of that destroying the hub that makes that act alone like it goes surviving for like the time being and that the control of that serum the whole range that permanently getting destroyed that way and even like the control of like the serum like the great number of like spaces in like the rainbow like that at the I'm done instantly with that scenario that I was defining as of right now and my own design. Okay, so that was made like looking very interesting right now. Like for like 11 right now, but then like 7 about me three with everything and that was decided to like proceed ahead and check something out like I'm the preparing right now for that. But then that room that I hope around there right now about to check out like on that in that room that I'm going to play later, we then a bunch of that three at least three stages one what I'm going to start. So like them all straight away and I'm going to like pop up entering that room and I'm going to like open out to any place that's not listed that way. But like I'm going from that kind like from that point. The case that's more available, it's also bringing that ambush attack on pop up. And I'm going to just take this case more of like to see attacking and considering monster and like pop up would be like probably won't be able to like defend and protect himself from that so immense to be the strength of like the table and straight away that through that ambush attack itself when I'm different like this most of the like pop up losing his like weapon and strength. So now pop up will be like struggling to like save himself and pop up will be crying and shouting out 11's name at that point for help. But like I'm looking at that was like 11 right now as like pop up right now about to enter into that room and had to do that room 11 right now so they breathing heavily as of that not been something that I'm looking which might be due to with like 11 right now, number different most likely might have seen something within like the energy level or something familiar to 11, like some sort of like a past romantic memory uh, connecting that location of that 11 specific location within like the energy level of that 11 will be what like 11 might have will see with the like the energy level it has like open considered ahead to then room the three members of the rainbow. So so different maybe that being like the rainbow room more like another than just some other specific scope within like the energy level thing. The 11 might have gone through a lot of pain and suffering. So like I'm doing that 11 all the way from like the beginning having had this episode of that being turned out and with like the memories of like the suffering of like 11 from that way that within that white or within like the laboratory that memory is coming rushing into that 11's mind and that resulting in that 11 zoning out like I'm doing like such an episode of like zoning out like happening to 11 right now. That's the scenario that I'm that's really like while Popper will be getting attacked and we will see who's struggling to like saving them from that at least 3 or 4 faceless monsters that and Hopper will be getting badly injured and that will be seriously badly putting injured and that wound will be totally unable to like save himself from like the through attack of at least 3 or 4 faceless monsters and Hopper will be bringing out 11's yeah, and calling out 11's name with that after the threat right from that hopper for that help of 11 that comes in 11 not hearing any of this right from hopper because of that the zone out kind of like a situation of that 11 that 11 totally not realizing the situation but don't kind of situation in which that particular situation which that hopper was using at that point of time scenario that I'm going to right so like because that initially as like the face of monsters really really bad and so bad in the hopper and maybe about to as like hopper will be about to get eliminated by that the big one I maybe to and about till actually conscious something like that. That very last moment is when I'm looking like 11 will be okay, snapping out of it and 11 will be shocking that totally hearing like loud screams of like the monsters and basically that multiple screams of like multiple monsters and that maybe offer as like of that screen and that only at that point 11 is only coming back from his own out state and like pull into the machine towards that right and like 11 straight away using success pause and save hopper and at that point I'm going to what 11 like goes in screen dictative because that hopper will be so badly and it's going to be injured by them by like those rhythm cases multiple three or four cases monsters by that scenario that so like even though you're not getting hopper like I'm by the like hopper being getting so badly injured is like the scenario that I'm looking over and my vocabulary temperature. So like this is like one positive, and this is like only one positive scenario that I'm the other positive scenario that I'm referring for like 11 would be going through that half memories of like suffering and putting it just like a turned out state like because in that place not just like attacking Hopper and Hopper not being able to like save himself and that at this monsters will be like slightly injuring Hopper to the point that as like Hopper will be on the world getting eliminated by these monsters and these with that pop-up with that one pop-up repeatedly calling out Eleven's name, but like Eleven not even have that like don't have case. So like as that way like as that pop-up will be also get eliminated by this like this monsters like in that very last second after the putting that movie that the destroying of that the hub by let's see and the resulting in that the control of that the shadow monster like the this monster coming under that point is like the scenario in that way, maybe that resulting in that alone resulting in that pop-up get to being saved and that point. Maybe like the scenario and like at that point I'm looking at once like the control of like the shadow monster or like the face monster will be that way. At that point I could demand to become and like at that point I can look at like the face monster on the surrounding pop-up at that point is confused and like the basis module at that point and the running away. That's the scenario that I'm so like as those this month is running away like I'm referring to those stages much like that profit 11 is like what scenario maybe that way 11 that turns out like 11 will be snapping out of her zone out state and as like 11 will basically realizing about like uh, at that point like 11 will be rushing towards like looking for Hopper and at that point like 11 will be finding Hopper in like a badly injured state which like scenario that I'm it's like another possible scenario that I'm going to and at that point I'm looking like 11 only for it and that only that being built to that absolute and frequent being Hopper in such a badly into a state is like the limited scenario that I'm going to protect and my as for like the other that I'm going to protect and my injury. Okay, so that definitely is not very unfortunate right now. That's for like the answer right now. They reflect that so joy from will as well as that speak right now about the light of that the hub. Like on the different that's the moment that the hub will be that put into that frames that that point it will come with that like a street and like the entire group of that might end up and also getting the biggest shock from realizing that like that's like it's another that small hub that they saw when we filter in the comprehension would be that's the tip of like the end of like the mouth of that gun and the huge giant slant lagging most of that would be buried in that underground. Definitely my was during it. So that's that giant plant like most of like coming up to that the suffer basically with its like mouth wide open and I'm looking at it straight away being in flames and I'm looking at it's like turning out and now it's through and I'm looking at it even turning out wine directed towards like where Steven or the movie and I'm looking at those wines on the front that swiftly that going up towards like where Steven or the movie and those wines grabbing one among the like the scenarios that I'm looking at I'm looking at that person maybe being like either might or like something I'm being most of the probability of like being adopted that like that giant hub like brand monster at that point to be grabbing hold on to it's like wines and looking at pulling towards like it's like with that personality that can steal and Mike and all of them would be that if it is grabbing onto that person and would be that trying to pull away from that plant like monster at that point then like monster at that point yeah like it's being such a struggle because that plant like monster as well that would be that which may be like fully doesn't at that point, but at that point will be like actually to be powered by the spring of like the shadow of the control, which definitely also my good friend. That struggle beginning from that point on. But like student levels is like maybe an hour that I'm also talking about and my friend worry. It is like definitely my person very concerned right now. That's for like my right now getting for by the wine and to remember right now kind of like about the close the tape. Definitely my person very ambitious that wine that has right now for my would be connected to that up monster. Definitely my person very ambitious for that. I'm putting that that up monster like using that wine spring like track my towards like that spring that probably that's going to like that have a monster that the scenario that have monster right now trying to like they might along with it so that the scenario that so like that Liam is right now with Steve and then Toby right now itself like to noticing good as like Mike is like getting pulled away by the white like the thing that Steve and always like doing that after that Steve totally using that spiky dude for bad and they're trying to like destroy that wine is like only one person out and get like the wine being too tough that like them not being able to like work at the wine. Even with that might be difficult, but that's like there are more kind of possibilities that I'm doing. The more I exactly possibilities that I'm working right now on the method for emergence for like Steve and others maybe right now not having like the update for bad as spiky days for bad with them especially because of like Steve was like updated by that massive and Mike and all of them towards like upside down amazing. So because of this reason, Steve might have definitely due to the reason Steve might have definitely that the Steve not being able to like prepare weapons like ability definitely that might can do that as they might have only for lot of like backup like offer weapon. Definitely might be very much like that they don't have much at all to that already other than the like other than the light fine like oil like they will be having that they need weapons that or like lot of people can occupy them. In that way like I'm looking right now Steve and all of them being in such a political situation where like with like Mike right now being put by the wine like Steve and others like will be totally running in front of like Mike and they will be trying to like pull the wine from the front of like Mike backwards nothing able to bring that those points connected to that this would might be totally connected to the absolutely that so string this up that I'm doing that and strong that I'm doing that my team along with like them being filled towards like full and right towards like that burning plant monster. It's like the hub monster of like the scenario that I'm doing. So that way like them doing that answer just to like totally fail my or like still it's not happening. So like I'm doing that way necessarily I'm doing them all like being tracked towards like the track all the way towards like reaching that burning plant monster when like man of the is still continuing on trying to like take up along with it. At that point was like the scenario there. So like I'm doing like speed and for them like not letting go and like them totally holding on and saying that's the very last second like the scenario that I'm looking and maybe like at that point where while they would be like might be like them towards like the land monster and like the burning plant monster and up monster and they would be getting so close to like the land monster. Maybe at that point Green when left to me would be like an extremely confused and shocked Billy would be like showing up to that okay it's the next scenario that I'm looking for at that point it was like Steve shouting out to that Billy to that confused point along the line the Steve shouting out to Billy and I was bring that the confused Billy like I'm thinking that at that point not saying anything at all that and they really straight away that and I'm putting that Billy at that point will be showing up for the next plus 5 baseball bat of like the scenario that I'm looking. So like Billy at that point will be thoroughly probably that confused with that same that situation of like thinking and discovering that's the upside down of like the plan. So definitely on top of that actually that is the burn plan of the kind of really really so we were not confused and that unfortunately at that point actually not making proceed or anything else. So you straight away go to make it to that state at that point and delete straight away change that you want to cancel out and like delete bringing it like right up like my kind of also will pull and getting so close to like to the burning plan on the like on the next delete. So the single thing of like the spike is baseball by like cutting off step away that is saving my velocity and all of it. That one was like the scenario that I'm looking for. And at that point them all like running back towards like that exit. So like at that point, I'm Billy is only shouting out to all of them that you all have a lot of explaining to do with your lines. I'm looking at Billy shouting out to all of them as they that all will be like running with that as it's like them all actively running towards like trying to like find that exit. And numbers currently them finally making it towards exit to them finally managing to like make it out of like that under upside down and back into that the public in time like saving the scenario that I'm looking for is right and my personal reactions. Because definitely my personal reaction that splitting over to that is with like 11 right now, 11 like pop up about to try to that close the game. Definitely I'm regardless of like 11 being so confident like I'm going to still lag. I'm definitely prepping lag. 11 won't be able to like close the game. Definitely my personal. So that's definitely I'm definitely prepping that two possibilities. That one possibility is for like 11 not being able to close the gate even while being confident that like 11 would be able to like close the gate. That for contradiction happening, maybe due to that element not realizing that element not expecting the level of effort that it has taken element to that open up like the gate, like to close the gate, like the 12 and 11 levels of effort alone will be required. OG alone can I like learn might be a single like one possibility that where like I'm naturally that far more like more than double like the point of like that element, far more than double like the point of and effort that element and power like element can use to that open up the gate of living required to that place the gate. So that one possible scenario that I'm the other possible scenario that I'm referring for that when not being able to close the gate and like the reason being due to even while the and strong like have that is showing like the control of the shadow of the on like the left is for the so different still so different still like the shadow monster since like the shadow monster is in like the parallel world and since like the gate connects like the real world still like the parallel world the shadow monster would be able to from like the parallel world will be able to control the gates still the limit so like I'm looking at the shadow monster has like 11 would be trying to like move the gate like at that point that the shadow monster will be like using all like trying to like keep like the gate full of like the full of kind of like state and just make myself ready to do that. That means that way that can be different like 11 regardless of all the effort and strength then that can like constraint that you need to use like 11 only being able to that close just a tiny only a tiny fraction of that the pro size of that city is like the scenario before like 11 would be probably a thousand and won't be able to do anything at all at that point with them scenario that I'm so like either two for the scenario that I'm looking through these two are like the possibilities that I'm considering through this like definitely I'm still thinking of my opinion that like definitely with that mic right now getting forced by like the wine 11 right now trying to force to get that me bring this back with one being 11 that would be saving my uh by closing the gate or anything. Definitely that's not what the narrative that I'm doing. And this time I'm looking at 11 not being able to like, close the gate and that way not being able to save Mike but also like, being like fully accountable that would be like saving Mike from like the wine like the amount that might reach like failing the scenario that I'm looking for the morning and my closing the gate. Okay, so that definitely my reason right now is that a single place that's not right now approach that's it. And that's straight away and start like some of the different definitely that single place that's not won't be the at all. Definitely type of reaction. And to ensure that bullpen motor is going up all by it then to be solely due to that the shadow motor right now to check the destruction of like losing its like control or like the face is not and that affects the face is not in like the real world and that way like the face is not like acting on its own way. If the would be that the case definitely the reason for like the face is not right now going up fight itself and all with that Dustin and all of the in actual games still similar methods generation for like that single business monster right now won't be it would be the real monster definitely my best for generation so right now with that must straight away assuming stuff like it's not like I'm looking right now for like scenario to be that custom right now instantly you get to that price and expect that single page is not like thinking it's stuff but like I'm looking at that point like that face is not like totally like attacking that's it it's like the scenario that I'm looking for and that totally scaring asking to that extreme and I'm looking like but yeah, at that point it's like still only using it like spiky for that and attacking like the base is not and I'm like putting that at that point it's that I'm referring that either most likely that was not still not ending up getting eliminated, but like it's totally running away at that point. So like the scenario that I'm referring and that person at that point will be badly injured and I'm looking at that and at that point I'm referring that still and my and matching that all of them get straight away blaming Dustin and they really asking Dustin as to, like what's wrong with like Dustin and that telling Dustin that like not all places not belong to like them totally that later Dustin at that point while Dustin so Dustin would be like screaming with like pain of like injured arm and I'm looking for like the Dustin will be also to do that at that point of that getting that dark off as well. It's like the scenario that I'm waiting for to pick and my theory. Okay, so like that's me my theory and question right now just like 11 right now trying to like close the gate like that's me my theory and right now for like the Sarah monster like right there like even like the Sarah monster right now as like 11 superpowers will be like slowly starting to like close the gates from like the bottom. So starting to like close the gates from the bottom. At that point, it will come to like the starting of the gate extending out. It's like a floor from like its arm and out and from like the paddleboard into like the railboard. And like at that point, I was going like shortly for like the top side that and like in all as well as 11 being like the top to like actually see like the true form of like the shadow monster from like the real world is like the scenario that I'm looking. And it will be just like the shadow monsters like claws or like the end of it like claws that they will be seeing. And that is the number to bring like sharing both format as well as 11. Intensively integrating the like the scenario that I was also like as 11 still about to slowly starting to like close the gate number between at that point of view like an entrance down of the window using it close and basically pulling that open gate downwards at that point. It's like the scenario that so like that way things struggles again like 11 and hustle the powers and like shadow monster and trying to like decide whether the gate would be closed or open. And I'm like easily the shadow monster without much struggle at all like the shadow monster would be closed exceptionally powerful and strong that I'm looking at the shadow monster it's absolute peace and basically pulling down on like the gate that 11 will be trying to that by the close using all sorts strength, but still the shadow monster easily or for 11 is strength and like easily with its like claws like pulling down the open gate like the scenario that I'm looking at. It's like a scenario that I'm looking at and by birth rate. At that point, self that will get sorted out of all powers and basically definitely that way that hop up and 11 at that point. Hopper at that point will be totally realizing that basically they have to that close the gate before it ends up being too late to like the point where like this might go to the emerging right now, but that's for like the shadow monster not entering through that huge gate in the channel to level it will be but it might be due to like the shadow monster being so extremely loose that like simply won't be able to like fit through that gate like maybe that gate that's like in like the round of like channel to level that's already so huge still won't be like might not be big enough to that be able to make it possible for like the shadow monster to be able to like, end up into like the real life on the bad one might be the case. We definitely might take the range. But at that point, like totally realizing that this is before like that case would be extending to like the point of that make it possible for like the government to like end up into that the real world on like the battle world. In which case that there would be absolutely nothing that offering you with like freedom. Or I also would give to that stop like the phase of the that would be that absolute serious possibility as well as like we are be setting it for at that point. So like the scenario that I'm looking for that way that I'm looking for that then how about only along with like after like saying or like them called the hand that you basically this like once we be totally them all finally taking the risk that basically to go up to the parallel world that has to get them to find like the layer of like the shadow monster and so totally burn up like the layer of the shadow monster while like the shadow monster will be restricting that layer and especially since like the shadow monster right now that we have any control over it that I'm going to run that and maybe might or like maybe might come to the conclusion that like that way since the shadow monster in that position that we have any control over like if it's like the shadow monster have lost their control over it, they will be able to like that have to lose steps to be able to like sneak into like the bad world and will be able to like find like the layer of like the shadow monster and while like the shadow monster will be sleeping or sticking that layer for them to like just ignite that and destroy that layer right the shadow monster will be within it and that way to take out the shadow monster that my kind of plan there was an like the scenario that I was always and I'm going to even though that and I was even in that attempt like that attempt easily backfiring and one part of that I'm looking like that attempt seriously backfiring will be definitely the places not that will be living in that the battle world definitely those big non elected will be what by now present in the battle world will be all under lecture control of the definitely my version again since like so it's only like the half in like the real world and all that like and Steve and all of them have right now to attend this deployment. Still, that there will be a great number of hubs in like the battle world. That will be my person there. So definitely underground hubs in like the battle world is definitely my person there. So definitely under like all the places not just in like the battle world in like the present might be under like the control of like, the shadow. Definitely my person there. So like during that whole secret mission to that go to like the battle world and deploy like when they are of the shadow like shadow like while they will be at a bit striking to bring down like shadow monster to point them even before by on that path to like make it towards like the layout of like shadow monster like them so we are running into uh cases monsters with like the scenario that up. get like even though they were managing to like escape that still even by then itself like the ShadowMonster so the control of like those cases models might have already figured out about like what that them or to be their incoming tax strategy that like they are planning that they cover the ShadowMonster. So like that way like the ShadowMonster team has to be prepared by the time that operand on and that them would be that as part of the challenge will be trying to like destroy like the layer of like the ShadowMonster and definitely bring them probably getting smarter with like a serious positive that of the world right for like and as like another cognitive benefit like that. And that way like them being chased by like the Taramotor and that way them ending up so that chase like them or ending up going when they are running into the this like in lamppost like thing that like will have seen the great number of lampposts in like the battle one that will have seen from like the real world during that Halloween day. Halloween night is the multiple so that Halloween day or like so like that location is where I'm splitting the magic premises of all kinds of this that maybe while being chased by the kind of a run field and they are like underneath the shadow of not being able to that attack that area like this not in the so definitely that light source within that laptop would be some special kind of light source which might have been totally created out of another player. So like both like lampposts, great number of lampposts usually leading them towards like this totally different looking building within like the one which would be like the secret space where like runner would be still like the rest of that would be those with like secret things to undo that the problems that he himself had created and to that slowly that's again uh before it's like two days it's like seven scenario that way like pop up and all like the biggest stuff on that on team run up within that secret phase like located within like the battle world. So that feeling scenario that I'm both moving against still on both sides like what oh yes, so that's also definitely my theory and written right now just for like the wine that grab being able to like grab and put in my like on the that definitely according to my book very interesting that those wines will be definitely leading to and connected to that very same uh plan like most of that up like most of like I'm bring that name of the frame is more like even though that Steve and those had said like that how that most of two planes like everybody still like until like that most of permanently rise out like and get permanently get that eliminate like until then like everything that plan like most through is like the shadow master will be controlling like the basis of those like still the shadow master thing would be have like still a certain extent of like control or like a bunch of like basis monster until the point where like the plan like up more stuff it's like fully ends up getting eliminated because make my difference. So that even right now with like them or theory like it's like my camera is like with them that's only and this will be the reason for like my being for getting caught by like the point also definitely my memory. So even though like the shadow monster not it's like control over well like on the still until like that up plan like not until it's like fully eliminated like still like the shadow monster road is still having control over like to certain extent of like the basis of like the real world still it's definitely my personal reality. So that this would be like the sound of like the monsters that like skill and like might and all them up here like that they are that's why we're trying to like climb up from like the outside down through like the road out to like the real world pumpkin to like the Michael very so definitely I'm going to bring yeah right now definitely for like the last person definitely getting caught by that this is one of like scenario that I'm doing. And definitely that that last person I'm definitely putting with is the absolute responsibility to definitely my work so like I'm doing right now states are failing in like saving everyone Maxine, Mike, and like Luke and Dustin, getting all of them up from like the upside down, like over the rope to like the bucket field. But like right as like then finally he would be able trying to like climb up to like the pumpkin field. And like Mike and those would be trying to like pull the out of like the upside down, underground upside down to like the pumpkin field. Like at that point is when I was like no like the his more of like jumping and like uh attacking that grabbing onto like the feet of that skill and pulling feet down just like the scenario that I made by zone. That name the connected team of series probably was like Nakin and Mike and all of them trying to like full speed up and say speed, but like the number three like multiple number three speed of three phase of one number three that would be or attacking plus speeds like and number three and the full speed down to set the scenario that so it's being such a sort of other and I'm looking at eventually I'm looking at those like multiple three or three one like I'm looking at only finally competing in that pulling speed down back into that underground outside of like the scenario and that way Mike and all the page just is forced to like scenario that I'm looking at. At that point, I was looking at all something like totally shocked, and at that point, I was looking at these that them totally cool that old that them totally seeing for this like 3 or 2 phases of monsters like totally like surrounding Steve and like attacking Steve. So like in that situation as that of Black Box, even though during box elimination, like even though back then like even though the numbers of like face monsters which is left under still numbers of like them surrounding for Steve and like them family injuring Steve and Steve totally going through all that pain and suffering and Steve screaming out and Steve like totally getting more and more injured and like and that scene would be totally shocking here and traumatizing that Mike and Maxine and all of them and I was them totally feeling that through fear finally at that point is like the scenario that I was saying. So keep the fear under the causing them to like freeze up and not being able to like, jump down to like stay still at that point is like the scenario that I was. And at that point is when like I was like them hearing like the sound of like car flying up there and that was really the leader was remember. So like at that point I'm looking straight away Maxine totally running towards like Billy and like totally grabbing on like Billy like and basically leading to like Billy to like stay to save Steve was like the scenario that I'm looking at. My thing would be in a little bit in tears at that point, it's like the scenario. Along with like Mike and Elizabeth and all of them like begging Billy to like save Steve. So like at that point I was like Billy finally like seeing Maxine to Maxine that in tears like begging Billy. I was like that finally resulting in that basically Billy solely due to that reason alone and Billy totally deciding to that do it and Billy straight away jumping down into through that hole straight away towards like post where like post three face numbers that I'm also trying to be like badly but other than without sadly injured the league my damage. So like at that point itself I was going to straight away jumping down and Billy straight away grabbing that place spiky place for that will be like on the ground and like Billy straight away really initially that would be shocked but like Billy still that mustering up like the courage and to be jumping down there and basically Billy putting up like that spiky base for that and Billy like swinging at like those 3 places more than that Billy totally with that I'm so might that would be sending and number swing has left Billy attacking to simultaneously attack and getting 2 of the bases monsters down. Then that point, like the third bases monster, like jumping on top of that city and like injuring the village, like the scenario. Yeah, like I'm going to believe all that might like only still won't be that cylinder must not being a flexible till around city with that before that like swinging towards the back and basically like taking out that other third base monster as well, like the scenario that I'm doing and really so quickly like stay picking up that Steve and telling Steve to like hold on to that Billy and like that Billy sliding up like that rope and making it to that bunker to it and that way like Billy saving Steve to like change the scenario that I'm about to do. And Billy at that point was like thoroughly confused, shocked and thoroughly confused that's that what is even going on with like even the scenario that I'm about to do and my positive it is that the method really numbers and by the great number of like top like trying to like rush towards 11 is trying to work again and might seem that definitely my secondary version right now is definitely so like definitely might out of the that genuine concern towards like 11 right now might totally from like something field that might right now jumping back into that underground upside down and might totally running out of those great number of that top like so that's like right now towards like 11. So the might be experience like Mike probably absolutely selflessly he had like in like an extremely reckless manner like okay running after the great number of like number Mike without even in his strategy or any idea at all in a reckless manner would be marching towards trying to that but that has looked intent to like save the event but yeah without having any clue as to how he would be able to do it and definitely I'm going so due to Mike being precious to that all of them and Steve as well as like Lucas and Dustin as well that Lucas and Maxine and all of them jumping back to like the upside underground upside down and that them all running after like the scenario that I'm right. So at that point I'm different 2% that I'm different that with that 11 right now trying to like close the game that I'm different that me I'm different that 2% that the fact that like the shadow monster still while like the shadow monster right now has clearly lost its like control over will that still like the fact that like the shadow monster is still able to like, control so many great number of like dark like monster and then maybe it being possible due to that since like the shadow monster losing less control over will happen exactly while like the hub was like set the hub monster hub plan like monster was like set a frame that so maybe like that the plan like hub monster like might still not have got eliminated. So like it would be still suffering through the planes and that sort of thing. So like they might so like maybe until like the point where like that like plan also really get eliminated, like so like the plane really continuing it like until that point. But that the shadow market still will be managed, will be able to like control the connection of that, like not just still. It's definitely my personal story and personal tilting on those. Not from like one positive that so like that might be how like the shadow market even right now they would like control the second greatest extent of that like so and the scientific work like is that my take is very construction and for one particular that they like I'm coming back to this great number of that are like also like basically like showing up towards that elevator like kind of thing for like pop up and 11 as well that so great number of that not like more like typically showing up and trying to like take out 11 but like pop up like that putting in that absolute 100% trying like protect 11 fighting on or just that great number of that stuff like but like I'm doing initially the lack of the number of dark light not doing too much that like them to literally only or orange copper and still understand the black copper body like copper to that protecting and covering 11 from that attack of that those great number of black faces monsters and that those that way that those great number of faces monsters under the command of like the shadow monster like trying to like thoroughly attack pop up like move pop up away from covering 11 so that like those faces monsters so the control of the channel can be like eliminated like the banana pattern. That way, like I'm just like the when still focusing on like trying to close the gate while Hopper really taking in all that injury from like the great number of the like was like fatally attacked and then the Hopper was like the scenario ceremony. And at that point, I was like has that Hopper is badly getting severely getting into like at that point, I'm like suddenly everything's stopping. The attack from regular like no he's like instantly stopped because like I'm the maybe at that point for like that burn like the plan like up not like finally becoming complete and like basically that plan like not like fully get eliminated. So that sort of thing in like the instant instantly that the shadow monster like loses like control over uh like bit over like the entire thing like the like monster in the real world. At that point, is that being the responsible one of the scenarios that I'm that way that hope of getting saved. And at that point I'm thinking the shadow monster will be or now or that approach was written by the like 11. And I'm looking at that point like 11 will be continuing on the like 11 super house like trying to close the gate. But like I'm looking at that point for like 11 still not being able to fully close the gate with like the scenario that how much 11 is to think that 11 still not being able to like fully close the gate. That was scenario because like 11 like protocol itself won't be long enough to be able to that close that sweet tree that Johnson realized it was happening to that 11 as the last of at that point. It's like the scenario that happened. And at that point, it's like 11 thinking of carry that with anything of having to like find carry that scenario that I'm because before like the gate opens up to like the point of that the gate being big enough for like Sharon of the and going to like the radar. So that kind of like a situation of that copper and you don't only think of but a worst case scenario and that way that so when like finding out about the carry and like starting that find carry as much possible. So like this is like one possible scenario that I'm looking for. The other possible scenario that I'm looking for like for points the great number of jobs are like not like the control of the shadow mode like okay badly showing up to a pillar and badly attacking off of hands that would be that about to that and then the that would be badly something and injuring pop up to the point of like not being able to left cover and protect 11 anymore like pop up being so badly hitting so badly injured by like the like most of the time hop up that way like finally set up like most of like taking hop up away and basically being able to like push hop away and that as like the like not really about to that about to attack 11 at that very last second that 11 finally completed like the process of closing that city with like the scenarios that I'm looking for like another organization that I'm looking for like at that point I'm looking that instantly like the like instantly that the complete connection control of like the normal or like the like that it's like getting cut off like scenario so like instantly the like monsters like coming back to the conclusion and this made them not attacking 11 or like 11 is like using reflection of like it is sending back the dark like multiple tools using that elevator kind of thing the like out of that elevator kind of thing and all the other dark like greater number of dark like not the tool or someone time to be figured out during that time of the control of the server if you trying to like make it towards like the elevator like all of them like don't even reach the elevator and elevator and focus and leave it just like the other possibility that I'm looking for so that if the first scenario then I'm considering that at that point like 11 fully closing the gate and that way that them like and all of them that okay saying that they will finally they have solved that this whole situation that finally they have saved that the town, not only the town talking, but like when they are fixing and they down the line something all of them will be all everybody. And I'm looking like once like 11 will be closing the gate, like I'm looking like as 11 will be all exhausted, like at that point like 11 probably also seeing like that shop inside where like 11 will be probably seeing like Mike probably shouting out 11's name, and 11 probably seeing that shortly seeing Mike appearing out of like one of the underground and a great number of underground like honeycomb like like from that like Mike probably looking at 11 and shouting at 11. That was like Muslim and like the others like listening from my like that like I'm doing that totally bring so much joy within that 11. It's like the scenario that it was about I'm Hopper being totally probably shocked at like seeing okay there in that honeycomb that underground kind of landing is like the last thing that would be like the last thing of but even at such unexpected situation. Definitely my experience. So definitely that way that I'm looking at that awesome. And I'm looking like once like 11 will be fully closing the gates and at that point I'm looking at an strange hope from like the shadow of loud hope from like the shadow of that loud hope of like that has to raise and operated towards like and end up towards like 11 that 11 and Popper will be here at that point. Like scenario that yeah like I'm looking like even when Popper and Joy and Bill and all of them will be like around like 11 people all gathering together and like we'll be having that huge banquet like I'm looking at that point like, all of them celebrating like their effort and like the saving of like Hawkins and humanity from that the battle world and everything and I'm looking that Owen does a little bit only invited definitely so, and then all celebrating and some people like all of them feeling as if like things have all returned back to like normal. So that will be when like India's like the days of months past like slowly once again like the shadow of that totally getting his revenge and by making things like next move. And that and to defend like the shadow of like coming up with like kind of strategies and that will be to like totally take control because like it might be after that like maybe the strategy that like the shadow of that point will be using which is like to take control and create like an entire army of like specific humanoid cases model in like the battle world, like the I'm just at that point that the shadow monster like totally targeting the humanoid cases model alone and taking control of that and creating great army of like the humanoid cases model alone. Since like the shadow monster will be realizing that like the humanoid cases model can uh, create like the focus from like the battle world to that the real world. So that way like I'm like the shadow monster like and I'm definitely that will be possible for like the stage one even by that the gate upload within like the level rate definitely my favorite for like the basic humanoid mode definitely my favorite so definitely that way I'm going to like the shadow monster like slowly like creating a bunch of strategies and basically like the shadow monster even though it will be like really angry that like it won't be able to like enter into like the real world and explore like the real world and get revenge on 11 and all that like it would still like the shadow monster like that's only attempting like to it's that's and like creating trouble in like the human world by spending controlling and sending a bunch of like an army of that humanoid creatures on by controlling them that can be like the numbers of like making them that use create forces and end up into that down the pocket. But still my consideration question for like maybe if like such the scenario happening and still during then like I'm showing when the shadow monster will be when I'm like aware that it will be that like since like the gates are closed like I'm definitely even though at that point something like the promotion of the shadow monster that way by taking control of the experiment and setting that to or commanding them and controlling them and setting them to that down how in that's the real world. Still, once like the faces monsters will be entering into that's the real world. At that point itself, like do you think that the lack of like the this is the case being closed and due to that's the lack of like the hub and those are like the face all those humanoid faces monsters like the moment they will be sent to like a real world fight with the shadow monster like the moment that those humanoid monsters will be entering into like the real world like the shadow monster like instantly new things like control over like the this like humanoid faces monsters like the scenario that I was trying to still understand maybe like the to totally create like proper like a making like the shadow monster like maybe attempting such a strategy and while like the shadow monster will be constantly figuring out trying to come up with like that absolute perfect strategy on how to like once again create a gate proper gate and position that eventually I'm position like the shadow monster would be finding out like that absolute perfect solution and that would be eventually maybe it would be only at that point that I'm position like shadow monster like totally uh, running into that even among like the humanoid race, like like the shadow monster really get just that point in the future that they are running into like the parallel version of like 11 who would have totally gotten like Wilson Park might have gotten transformed into that basis model, humanoid basis model, who would be like the leader of that the entire thing of like the humanoid basis model in like the parallel version also like all the development. So like that humanoid basis model might have been definitely like that exact uh, humanoid basis model that has tried to like communicate with like 11 in like the dark void when 11 has entered into like dark void for like time in like the during Brana's experience, it's definitely my first experience. I'm approachable that very faceless most of that humanoid model. Even trying to communicate with like 11 that that's when we do like on seeing 11 like on seeing 11 shape like being reminded of that itself like the true parallel version of 11 which might be what's within that transformed humanoid model in definitely not to grow and for like I'm still taking the my own experience that like so like the parallel version of 11 I'm like preparing myself in that system path like the parallel version of myself through just like or like the parallel version of 11 might have already opened up that again in like the parallel version leading to connecting to like other dimensions and it might be that and like in like the PAL version front of and like the PAL version we don't give like they might have not succeeded in like being able to like close that way and that way that they might have standard to the point of like this other assignments like swallowing up like the entire thing like the PAL word so like the PAL word that might have had like the stuff exactly like the real word and might have had like a plain buildings and everything and like the PAL version of like the humans in like the real world and living with the PAL world like that entire world might have already got consumed and swallowed up by these dimensions that might have swallowed up like entire like the parallel world states that like able to adapt the parallel and like parallel element might have been what might have happened in like the past. So like that way exactly like how will in like the past was abducted and taken to like the parallel world and eventually it was like trapped put into like a trap situation with like this thing on that switch. Uh, no, I'm doing the same way that one of like the team not response that way should like the hair opening up in like the bad word once they might have started to fit into that's the real one that way. Like at that point that is the humanoid the rate number of humanoid like might have maybe captured like the bad version of 11 and might have trapped 11 and might have that way by putting that thing into that mouth like and that might be that process through which that a human fully transformed into that humanoid way. That is medicine. So like it might be only that among humans, like it will be only constant like the doing high IQ that like the even like the humanoid traits is not to be seen as like special to be able to like sense as special that like to be like the only ones that they might not maybe might not eliminate or like would be converting into having them transform getting transformed into like a humanoid traits one might be the case with the humanoid or like I'm doing that maybe along the way in which like the humanoid faces more to like how they want to be so like how they try to like attempt their type of might be only through acceptance and transformation of human blood like into turning them into like faceless members like in themselves with like the public academic. So like in the case of winning like even with like spreading happening within like spreading of like the bad what's happening within like the sole reason for like when not getting transformed into like a face monster that might have been due to like operandi in time like salience with like the bad word that might be the case. So like the bad word of learn might have not been so optimized to and might have not got killed by anyone. So like that way like the bad word of learn might have got fully transformed into like a humanoid face monster. And that way like even after getting transformed into like a humanoid face monster like the bad word of 11 might have still been able to also retain superpowers like might be the case that might have been what might have happened with the type of event. Yeah, like the band version of 11 might have not had like a conscious or like a human conscious or something that she might have turned into like a monster in that physical transformation as well as like mental transformation as well might have been what might have happened. Definitely might have been. That way, like the fan version of 11 and the like the presenting actually of like the basic model, like the fan version might have been actually a couple something like the humanoid monster like that was for like a long time before like the shadow monster might have entered into like the battle. Might have been what might have happened. So like I'm doing right now, if the 11 right now actually succeeds in that closing the case, then I'm like eventually like that's at least around the shadow monster like running into this like layer of like the face of monster. And I'm also bring like the shadow monster speaking would be like bad version of 11 like not only do like the basic humanoid monster. So like that way like not like the shadow monster will be controlling that like humanoid spaces monster layer of that. And looking at that point like the shadow monster like by going through its like memories like shadow monster realizing that like it's just like special and it has like superpowers in that, so that of like 11. So like that way, the parameter at that point controlling that the value version of 11 runtime is like the similar to using that control power like that layer of business model like like the parameter creating another pair. But this time it will be like I'm just saying that at that point that the parameter creating that pair, but that have to test at some totally different location. And it won't be happening in like the kind of the laboratory, but in that from the lab, but that only different undisclosed like secret location, maybe from like somewhere deep within like not pause in like the palbot and within like the shadow monster like probably from like the palbot when controlling like the leader of like the immunity which monster like it will be like palbot like using that sort of to like create that secretly from using and that's not the talking like backward and that slowly varies to the point that by the time proper undergoes will be even finding out and realizing about like such a different only different they are having happened something that the real world and the bad world that I'm doing by then will be too late. So like the there by then will be so issues and that at that point while theory is that trying to close that they're using 11 and looking at them totally being like shadow monster only responding by just like by then like a the shadow monster like just that actually felt like creating a bunch of like hub underground hubs within like the underground like the town of underground of like much like the scenario seven. So like by the time that comes to like 11 and like the real world 11 and above would be finding out about the guns would be trying to like close the gates that under the point like them the shadow monster using the trump card of like the parallel version of that 11 transforming to that's the previous monster and it's like about against like 11 because that in the first scenario that way that it's not being possible for like 11 maybe even with like any self that can do the next not being possible for them to like close the gate like and with the scenario that about but like even more like a free trouble than like the trouble they have right now in like the percent that would be usually happening in like the round of public at that point is like the scenario that I'm looking and the purpose is very impressive. And at that point I'm looking at 11 and 10 is will only be point disappearing in that closing the gates only towards like the very end of like the show of like the show for instance in that scenario that I'm looking for. So that before that I'm preparing like two war that happening is like between that this that undisclosed that space kind of space from like the real human world because like by then like the that information like the critical secret information about like the passport and everything about the situation is around how by then we can see like stuff is about and then like I'm thinking like due to like the orders of like the higher office example to find that undisclosed like secret like highly advanced like communications like I'm that we getting used in that war to like take out like the army of like the charges and everything. Basically through such a manner finally once that war would be uh would be that the point will be only towards the climax of like that war and like and I was like 11 after that scary like I'm sort of like it's even taking the great number of like paid experiments of that or the remaining failed experiments of like to collectively use that superpower, for them to even be able to succeed in that maybe close to the case. It's like given the scenario that something like always running and my thing is very for us. I think. Okay, so like definitely my question very question right now is that they use by 11 point that what run of my field that something for my field 11 like so definitely my question very interesting and so like run of being that the wound of that 11 zero and basically could eventually cause like elimination of that 11 itself and on that do you think that corona was that prevent was I think like we was that weapon so 11 that to use 11 as that weapon that definitely so that on top of that even that was you might just only today with it as like the human once like around the brain was like a first like one that what one of the reasons would be that once like 11 zeros like like the moon as well would be zeros like 11 so that has like 11 zeros like this is about that 11 has to like would be growing and on the black 11 because like I'm thinking like the situation might be that maturity might be that at 11 zeros like the body might be able to that contain that intensity of like super powers of when so the powers will be growing and all of that 11 but like I'm looking like eventually on that the growth of that element that is the like the growth of human that reaches a certain point basically reach a pretty at a certain point that from that point on the human body as well as might maybe might not be able to like, contain that superpower once it's like start it's like slow decline and on the contrary in the case of that superpower like it might be situations where like the superpower might continue on steroids without any decline might be like restricted. So like that way, once like human body might start to that start towards like low decline after building the peak that so maybe at that point the slip about human body and might not be able to that contain that the zero the consistent zero of that superpower at that point, and that might be how that might be what might eventually lead to nuclear or thinking like the elimination of that person who possesses that superpower might be what like brother might have maybe intended by the black side of that they would eventually lack the wounds of 11 that eventually going and spreading and eventually eliminating 11. So definitely my considering numbers. Yeah, like I'm definitely 11 probably like even bypassing like runners like expectation when 11 doesn't survive definitely my second game. So that means towards that is the end of like so 20 things like that final war like like 11 that totally 11 about 11 has enough like power to be that raising that peak point of zero is definitely my criterion. But like 11 zero number something like 11 zero when the rating is actually quite but like 11 super power will be having way more unlimited way of that unlimited kind of like a path to that continuous zero. So, so that way like something like 11 body and mind and that by then will be reaching that peak and that final war like I'm just that 11 that unusing all the strength that 11 getting having at that point and using that ultimate power getting out that 11 in that point you actually finally managing to that close the gate. Definitely on top of that the 11 in that war final war using 11 like super power a lot to that attack against that maybe like even like shadow mark up and everything and lot of cases like the scenario that I so like that sort of that using so much of like an answer for usually process strain to like the point of that 11 totally finally starting to that video that basically once that by the time 11 will be like going through that extreme struggle of to that move the case of the cabal, but at that point in that final zone of scenario 11 number 1 again 20 that word of that of like the wounds of that 11 that per day and eventually eliminating 11 but like that way 11 might be feeling at that point that like just to be hit for like 11 so like 11 also connect by 11 will be at that point will be putting all that effort to that and putting input for plan will be trying to like that way at that point 11 will be totally saying that will be even if it's through 11 sacrifice that 11 kill that ends up to like close the gate that way so that like might put totally live on that basically and not might but offer and like the way of letting 90 to do safe it's such an experience that this is remember the like element of the overall ethics and like element of the exploring the black hole by using all of that maximum power at that point in that film, like the dynamic that I'm talking. That way, I'm also saying that finally start predicting that close into gate. Yeah, like I'm that taking single sport on like 11 sport is going to finally getting injured and probably getting injured. And even suffering a lot, and I'm looking that even getting hosted like at that point, and that would be only might represent all of them. So they might would be only hoping for like even to be able to make it still regardless of giving up, but like the others like and all of them that will be might end up will only hoping that that element still so, but like the others will be seeing how badly injured and affected element will be getting by that point. So that final attack of that element to that post like so the like the second maybe that the others don't need to be enough level that of like any corporate that level supply that. But like I'm definitely that totally luckily I'm still full event totally managing to like supply like personal that way like 11 totally throwing one of from that to like personal that brothers line of from and that way 11 survive that home and like even though the was like that that whole situation of that finding so long but like maybe like proof in that case that by going beyond like the levels of point superpower using superpower that learn body and that skill 11 numbers when to that time like 11 that totally that managing to that something happens to that learn body and that start resulting in that basically 11 even surviving that move of like the superpower that 11 that would always control like and that it's 11 like body that it's not so like but like I'm that definitely 11.0 being free from that runner speed and everything. So definitely that way, like I'm looking that definitely the situation with like 11 being like as long as that 11 doesn't that goes 11 like to the power to that high intensity like 11 being able to show that we safe and live above a normal life all the for like the remaining of like learn like until voltage would be along the lines of like a situation in this network, and that way like 11 probably that or something that won't like 11 and living happily with like Mike that there and the real like swimming scenario that is all about and my also certainly my person's very conversion right now is for lab in that percent while 11 closing the day like 11 that switching from using the single hand to support electric and like 11 when devastating on the villain just would be definitely part of that growth of that boom which would be different usually like that super for 11 specifically my position. So like from this incident onward like I'm looking like from right now like the person closing the gate like from this point on like I'm looking like on like 11 would be a recover example looking like 11 being able to like use both of um, uh, being using from that point on, every time will be using that I'm sure that you that will be using that because like I'm looking that from that point on 11 being able to like really use superpowers that in both of our arms and like just like both of our arms like I'm looking like will be comfortable with using now will be able to like use something or that can be quite good and that way like comes into like it's our arms 11 superpowers like when of happening on that right and on using that the every time 11 will be using like superpower reflect both of our contract the monthly have is like would be like the scenario from this point on and like I'm looking at that 11 right now in that intensity of flows in the gate even levitating as well that's different from this point on 11 being able to that levitate getting like the power to like levitate as well is the lead method and being able to like do that without necessarily pretty so also that lead method that way like the zone growing would be so that way, I'm symbolically getting represented through that instant power upgrade, major power upgrade that I'm representing that 11 would be having to begin from this point on. So that's what's gonna happen. So that way 11 being able to like levitate freely and also be able to like use that success on both of the arms. Like the scenario with the power upgrade that 11 will begin from this point on. Would be only having from this point that make my direction. Eventually, I'm looking that power upgrade even spreading to like the point of that element being able to use eye as well and basically to strongly move objects and basically even being able to like use of telekinetic power with like such great intensity with eyes as well as like attack like even not even having to like use to like basically to use to lift up arms and use extend of arms to like attack and destroy dark like faces models but like at that point even being able to like destroy them with like just eyes like by using telekinesis through eyes I don't there's like also like an scenario that I'm looking for. And luckily I'm looking like to the pulse like I'm looking like getting more and more stages that like kind of like the scenario that I'm looking for perfect and my very so like definitely my coaching very interesting right now and for like the car that and right now so nothing for a lot like my student and like always like I'm looking that but that will do definitely my brother me still thinking of my brother that like to be like maximum striving that might have made it possible like for like the new video like right now in like where exactly it might end or those was so like that way right now I'm looking at me without realizing that everything that had to want happens just now that I'm not realizing any of it like I'm looking right now really totally like really aggressively walking towards like street and all of them and basically get like a different like really good mood right now something really insecure definitely it is out it's definitely my preference but we do that really the present situation being that really right in front of Mike and all of them and he's been in front of me having like basically being brought down by massive so like definitely that something of like being ego might already have and to be right now to be like relating to work as well so definitely my very comparison so but they still believe they like trying to like just to like fight it and to be aggressively showing up and they really looking straight away threatening landscape and all of that to like never should never didn't need or even speak to like maximum at all. So get on the lines in that capital like connected to a tool is like below the threatening state and all. So like at that point I'm looking like to be paying orders and to be fully matching away and basically as like to be about to get into the step car. Still topic and like parent believe that they will about that still at that point only continuing to believe that about like exposing like the truth about like being brought down by magic. That is that is spreading that news all over like the topic maybe along with the lines of spreading that Steve at that point that threatening to be so like at that point I'm like getting extremely enraged and basically walking up to it like Steve and basically believe that still without doing anything like I'm going to believe still next only and when man like without doing anything anything at against like still at that point that maybe still return back to that start and just driving away with that scenario that and at that point I'm looking for that Mike and Lucas and Dustin really totally finding still so extremely cool and like that's like an absolute job and I'm doing that all doing that I fight to like see like scenario that I wrote about it and that was very also definitely not the generation person right now and for like right now for like proper status and like it's like right now everything that proper of like still not like I'm looking definitely still second to my person to the emperor and like proper still definitely might definitely and like it's definitely my person to the end so that the second year was connected might have been the parallel version of that proper that like element might also and found so that's the last word in like the past that my person to the emperor and so yeah, right now like so it's the case that of that category, like 11 right now gaining what appears to be like this like power of there. Like I'm looking from this point on, like I'm looking at the situation with like 11, I'm trying to like the power of there. I'm looking at 11 while sleeping, I'm looking like having vision of like things that have that's like going on in like within like the category of the treatment related to like touching a power of here 11 getting from this point on that's the method. So like I'm thinking for to be like 11 that point would be that without grade level like one night watching a music sleeping level like 11 seeing the vision of that Barbara being alive in like the past but it's definitely my opinion. Like 11 is totally seeing that vision with such absolute clarity, to be doing such absolute clarity in that vision. And I'm looking for like even saying that to that Nancy, see the big to that Nancy. And from that point on, I'm looking for like Nancy to this family extremely step, definitely my direction. Nancy figured out by then moved on from that Barbara. At that point, I'm looking at the game that kid and everything be happening with Nancy. So like about the like and Nancy didn't start me believing in a of such capability. And that way I'm looking that way I'm looking maybe through Nancy and see something maybe opening up once again opening up that the gate to like the band to that with like Nancy intent to like say about like the first person that I'm working on the way. That way like I'm looking like maybe that way like I'm looking them opening up like once again opening up like the gate to like the band with like the but like in that absolutely and I'm looking maybe without my camera looking not even fighting out. So also like about say that I'm looking and while they're trying to like find and say about like maybe like the shadow monster like maybe like going up there and then like chasing up and then that resulting in that maybe Nancy getting trapped in that the world with like 11 and all 11 alone like being able to like make it back to the real world. That's one possible scenario but or like that shadow monster showing up and they see that also thing in that book 11 as well as like Nancy getting trapped in that world. Definitely that sort of thing that I'm super my best. Okay, so that's definitely my considering comparison right now as well. Like Lucas right now, I can think to that enough, like to select them for the for like the snowboard time. I'm just recording right now. I think the company is very big Lucas, and at that point, it's I'm looking back at the simulator only during three because like the simulator everything that like it's because like Maxine did don't have that like very good to like custom. So like right after like Maxine we do that, so they think Lucas on the different like custom straight away that I think that's what for like the snowboard has and then before that matching suggestions stuff as well. There's like the scenario that I'm looking for it. And then I'm going to find that matching totally walking up from there and I'm going towards let's say having noticed that narrative within that location like that snowboard snowboard and place like that. You can definitely see would be that right now within somewhere within that place definitely where like the other that can be definitely I'm focusing right now for like substance as well as like look at getting the biggest job. But like imagine right now with maybe slowly walking towards like the who would be like only doing something else in that that call in that goes so like I'm gonna like imagine totally asking the if it stands with like this like the scenarios that I'm doing and still to that point being totally complete and another point that still and like matching language at that point while another point like at that point for like uh, I think as well as Lucas being that absolutely blown away and shocked. It's like scenario that I'm looking at. Definitely, I'm still sticking to my procedure and as well. Like, I think definitely state of having will be only having a truck, another truck and speed, which like I'm looking at matching would definitely not be having that courage to see that Steve definitely my thing. But like I'm saying that about which like my film in like the distant future will be like telling to Steve is definitely my thing. So like that way like the lot of like Nancy. So that way I'm just like even though even with like Steve looking Nancy, definitely bringing in like the future like that. When my friend was not found out all of like about that Nancy and Steve immediately out seeing in that it's like scenario that I'm definitely perfect my position. So like definitely the government is very interesting right now. Like preparing for like natural to like ask Steve to consider and the next Steve it was like initially telling like showing that like that interest at that point and Steve was also confused and like quickly looking towards like well person will be static or the and like I'm still totally being confused and but like nothing still like being consistent and they believe that they getting Steve to that time like it's like so scenario that at that point like I'm looking for Dustin can do this to see like staring, glaring and staring at like Steve, like you standing with like my dream, but that has to raise it like the scenario that I'm supposed to perfect and I'm going to do it. And Nancy will be totally laughing and like will be totally won't be able to catch on the laptop while watching Steve. That's like my dream, like the scenario that I'm going to do it and my dream. Okay, so like definitely Mac is very impressive right now. So like Maxine right now is getting to dance with because and that there as well another there is this as well to dance like I'm the same with that might as well as that's the hello. I'm going to bring definitely 11 definitely will be making it definitely my story. So that way like I'm going to bring still work with an uh, one possible scenario for like 11 that might end with some of the bring it's just saying that might as well as stuff in that will be only that and they think that that they don't have anyone to let them, which would be when like I'm the different like and might only talk to each other as if like they're on the same boat and I'm looking at that point like the unexpected happening with that 11 making some entrance to the snowboard and that way like I'm doing like 11 as well as that might camping at like the very center of that so that's the scenario that I'm doing and that at that point I'm doing it for that's in that all by himself that we like with like head down like on the ground like person will only that and like person will be walking out of like snowboard with like the scenario like, and at that point like nothing getting like the biggest job because like at that point nothing probably finding the not having that so because like I'm looking like the after like spending so much time with like person like the my doubts had like maybe a feeling of that maybe nothing nothing up and like not getting to like have anyone with that Steve might have maybe considered this possibility to like maybe that way like Steve might have that after dropping off nothing like Steve maybe that deciding to like wait a bit and basically with that if that person shows up leave we find that person leaving like uh to like comfort and calm down with the along the lines of the like in such an extremely concerned manner, like out of that concern, like feel on the thing at that point, maybe that that's only the section about looking at something fighting shield with the staff right there. So like I'm in that way that skills will be straight away grabbing Rufflin's shoulders and I'm looking like the Steve and Dustin getting into Steve's car and I'm looking like Steve trying to like comfort first Steve like genuinely trying to like comfort but like I'm thinking like Dustin that only wending out like and up towards like Lucas at that point of like the scenario that I'm looking for. Because like something down right now would be extremely angry towards like Lucas for like asking Matthew out for the stands and basically for Matthew even agreeing like nothing will be totally irritated and angry definitely not with the present of for lesson like probably wending that all that out on like the day and that and still will be trying like comfort lesson and that as well totally like sorry on fourth stage with like just getting angry and shouting at Steve as well for like Steve advice and blame putting all putting all the blame on Steve that like the Steve's advice that like the result for like Dustin not having any things that will be along the lines of the different nothing totally bending out on Steve. But like I'm with the brain after a while like nothing totally cooling down and basically and like Steve and Dustin probably Steve telling Dustin that basically that for like that right we can still on the spring really saying something to like Steve and then being like Steve like something as well and like with like a situation of Steve being like Steve singer and along like everything like definitely like Steve saying all that to like Dustin and comforting and finally come down Dustin by they will be taking that drive and I'm looking in that drive that like Steve and Dustin could use take it over like I'm looking that them totally running into like a humanoid face with the author. It's like the scenarios that I'm. So like with that, like the episode ending, it's like the one copy scenario that I'm looking for thing. The other scope with scenario that I'm looking for things about like with like Lucas as well as like Will as well having their like I'm looking like with like Mike as well as like something for like look like looking maybe like other open scenario being like Mike as well as Justin sitting Sam and like sitting there on like the same door of like not having anyone to tap to or like at that point I'm looking like like the entrance of like 11 but like not by reflection but that was like carry like all of those scenarios. So like on the maybe what might have happened at that point the content might maybe that you can have such a scenario happening where like hop up or like dropping off like 11 to like the snowboard location but like and once like hopper will be leaving by telling 11 that actually we come to that fix 11 I'd like a specific kind and once like hopper will be leaving number to that 11 getting like the biggest shock like carry showing up towards like 11. It's like scenario that I'm looking for. So like I'm looking a whole month something like that by this time like maybe carry might have definitely 11 so much to the point that like carry deciding to that what falls up that sort of and that way like carry might have recently might have managed to like that way set that up with about and to be able to like actually like start work space. So like I'm doing that way carry looking for like clones and searching for winners and having sound elements that it's created. So like that way, like carry totally making it. And by the time carry making it towards like element that when carry might have seen that hop of like element and basically element carry apply off with like snowboard building. So like at that point, like carry might have once that hop of like carry might have straight away approach element and basically carry that and to learn this for the shop to like see and it's really happy to like see from the yeah, so like I mean, carry up the only concert to 11, and that way, like then work deciding to like enter into like snowboard related like scenario that are different. So like that way, once like 11 will be make her entrance into like the predict that if the media might actually that stop and that will be getting that happy for trying something like 11 but like Dustin as well at that point probably would be blown away by that seeing Gary like the scenario that even though Dustin at that point will be seeing Gary for like the first time like that still like Dustin instantly having like a massive crush on Gary. So it's like the scenario that so like I'm looking like even and Gary is only walking towards like Dustin and like and after considering that straight away like 11 and Mike straight away strong to that and basically at that point it will be just carry and Muslim and I'm looking like just at that point that feeling out of like it's now or never and they was totally making the move and I'm looking for carry and I'm looking like that early trading get like still carry totally that and at that point like nothing will be totally feeling even more down and feeling out of like all of love but like at that point I'm looking like carry totally that totally like unexpectedly at that point like telling Dustin that like uh, for them to like dance and they do that way like constantly so in having and like getting and something as well dancing in like that no and just like doing this scenario so like during like and I'm bringing this would be how like I'm bringing this like whole reunion of like Gally with like 11 and that way through 11 with like Gally interacting with like end up getting matching and I'm going through this like whole interaction eventually like Lucas as well as like Dustin as well as like Mike and Rich to probably finding out so Gally to actually like they're already actually getting it is to like carry through 11 like under like up with the last like I'm just like actually eventually then probably finding out that like Mad Max in fact that I'm the friend that the interaction going through and usually raising eventually about like the games and the update and the legend. So that definitely eventually I'm the friend like the interaction ending up with like Mike and all of them like shortly finding out that Mad Max is in fact like not Maxine but like Gary. Like the more time that short realizes that's what it's like living scenario and this is only for the and my okay, so like my commentary introduction right now is as for like something like current attempt to like basically to ask like a random to that attempt of testing some of the different like resulting in like a harsh rejection. Not only in like a harsh rejection, but like I'm looking that also like making fun of and like not interesting and especially even about like the things that you test like that way like I'm doing like a sort of a that getting that harsh rejection And on top of that, even made fun of by that girl and her friends like the scenario that happened. And that way, and at that point, I'm the different maybe for like for wrestling purpose like head sound that they gave while still with that absolute rage like storming out of like the snowball building is like the first scenario that I'm looking for everything and that was very okay, so like definitely my book very impression right now as for like with like Mike and all and like fancy and like the snowball that's like as usually the shadow of team that like that getting that word. On the other hand, like it won't be lag due to lag substance of mice or like busted or like Nancy or like Nancy person in that snowball building would be at all or like the process of pop up or joystick of like waiting of guys won't be like the reason for that the shadow monster right now isn't in that very exact snowball building with extra parallel but it will be solely really like the functions of 11 and 11 alone in that snowball building. So would be like the sole reason for like the shadow monster doesn't right down in like the parallel. It doesn't leave my experience because like I'm definitely predicting that day that like 1 month back while 11 had closed the gate to the enterprise. Since then I'm looking like the shadow monster might have been extremely angry with like 11 for like closing the gate and losing its like chance for like that way from and taking away its chance to like only realistically rule on that and protect the password through that's the real world and take over like the real world after. So definitely I was preventing the group at that point back then that 1 month back when Film had closed the gate like window the Karamazar might have been extremely angry frustrated and left 11 and might have wanted to like eliminate 11. Uh, but like as like time passed like between that 1 month like like Karamazar might have been able to like see that 11 would be it's that see that like see the potential because it kind of like the potential lying with it 11 if then the shadow monster might have at that point regretted like taking control of will and the shadow monster might have it will be totally off the like would be totally off like the mindset to like want to like desperate with it the shadow monster right now would be desperate to like take control of 11 but like the shadow monster might have only felt that it need it instead of will like the shadow monster had taken managed to like take control that 11 then that the shadow monster could have created as many by that way accessing 11 like superpower and by controlling 11 like the shadow monster could have created as many like as many gates all across like the human world as like the shadow monster wanted they mean that way could have made it impossible for like the others to even be even without that way without even like the purpose will that it will be impossible for like the people of the human world to close the gate to be around the lines like the shadow monster might have figured out and might be for me regretting taking in like the person is only regretting that controlling to instead of that level. Definitely my person being. So I think that's the person like that the biggest priority like the shadow monster like would be 11 and 11 and all that somehow and I'm looking at the shadow monster that day so like when that kept the past month since like after like 11 was in the case the shadow monster might have been following around 11 wherever 11 goes in the real world, but Shadow Motham might have been consistently following 11 around that would be like take control 11 would be like the only priority, highest priority in like the Shadow Motham. The only thing in like the mind of the Shadow Motham is that definitely might have been the Shadow Motham would be since like 11 has like the power to like open up a gate between like the real world and that world. And the different like Shadow Motham will be like patiently following around 11 and observing 11 from like the bad world and basically like would be patiently waiting for like anyone to like make some an accidental mistake like I'm looking like this around will be like following 11 around in hopes of like 11 at some point like for the messing up and making some sort of like an accidental mistake which might something like the case of the and they are happening between like the real world and that world. On this like the shadow monster will be patiently waiting for that moment so that like and that will be within this 1 month might have been prepared like the perfect strategy for like take like one such an accidental mistake when happens from 11 and it would will cause to the thing in that another tab opening from the regardless of wherever it is that like that tab opens up in like the real world and that kind of world that connected area like the shadow monster will be right now when it goes to be whenever it goes to like act fast at that point itself like take an actual advantage to make it impossible for like element to like to stop that at that point. So definitely my procedure is on to go that definitely a different like Java monster within this like past 1 month period might have prepared like maybe to control and prepare an army of like cases similar models also like this is also certainly my procedure and so definitely in the way that I'm different that the shadow monster will be continuing on like following 11 in that there are 11 goals in that real world, like the Java so they like probably follow 11 and so occasionally hoping and expecting for that moment for like 11 so he makes a mistake and actually open up that another case to the battle. It definitely might be very temporary. Although it definitely might be very urgent right now that action. Like example like 11 that can well have like the same similar kind of telekinesis powers. And things like what the mango doesn't carry that we won't be having any idea at all about like other than like carries like the kind that the memories of like the days that carries have been at like another available regardless of that might run up might have number of like experiments in like carry like back and number like the experiment might have ended up in that failure to be released and everything like that. And even back then, even though Gary might have had like even in the rainbow room, even though Gary might have had superpowers, like still that and those superpowers of Gary might telekinetic powers still so telekinetic powers of Gary might have been nowhere near strong at all to actually create that pair and to open that gate within the rainbow field of that world might have been the case that might be the rainbow. So like that way even after like even White Scanning has escaped from like from like the rainbow room from like runners and Mozilla was saying like the buff that we carrying metal use for telekinesis superpowers and for like making up like hallucinates power to escape from like kind of the above. But still I'm also trying like that still even at that point like 11 might have been like the reason for like 11 not returning back to like the rainbow room at that point might have been due to that runner probably seeing like that drastic difference in like 11 like superpowers when compared to like intensity of speeder intensity of like 11 like superpowers when compared with carry superpowers. So one like might have felt that like 11 might actually finally be uh see like might stop with like run of like speeder speeder experiments like finding the freedom of like when run of might have seen that potential in 11 and might have seen that possibility so 11 like it might be at that point that according to like orders like and like 11 might have been separated from Cali on the rainbow definitely might have been and shifted into like another role might have been what might have happened and Cali without realizing that like 11 was still in like the unavailable Cali that might have been like suggestion can Cali without realizing this might have said assumed that like 11 had escaped like not without it and that might be how Cali might have escaped definitely might have been so like I'm still thinking of my person that like even doing the person like Cali might have other than the memories of victory, like Charlie wasn't like the rainbow of like the Charlie might have absolutely no idea at all as to like what is that the true like importance of like those experiments that Sabara was being Charlie as the definitely might be so definitely even to the person Charlie might be totally unaware of like the existence of like Japan was all about like the basic concept or about anything but definitely might be very understand. So it's because of this reason coupled with like the fact that Charlie can use like the very similar kind of telekinesis power as that of 11. I'm not referring that Cali. I'm referring the mistake happening from Cali's side, just like the scenario that I'm referring to. Just I'm referring to like the shadow master who is only unaware at all about like the past stage of experiments and the experts that for now. And that way that there are existing multiple people in the real world of being like within that kind of like telekinesis power as that of like 11 that can throw is like the gate can be open within the real world entirely about which like the shadow master, even though the person is probably unaware of the definitely my person brain. So like I'm looking like I'm looking like usually the scenario that I'm looking in season 3 for like maybe thinking through can that makes other person do that understand that maybe while trying to like escape another robbery and like by to carry and robbery and will be like trying to like escape another robbery and will like carry like using her like telekinesis power and like with like all this time passing like and carries like exactly like 11 bones like all this like films of kind of like each of like those subjects each of like the 11 subjects total 11 experiments subjects all those individual human activity or having those bones exactly like 11 that will be growing and spreading like some of they will be growing in things as well that will be and this bones according to my research will be their superpowers so like understanding that way, like as time passes, like I'm trying to infiltrate and producing like carry by along with proper gas by trying they will be trying to like escape and from like the torchlight I'm doing like carry most likely using the energy power station and at that point like the intensity of like that power be more than carry to be expecting and that growth of actual power within carry and that resulting in that another maybe happening between like the real world and like the parallel world. And at that point, so that gap being created by Gary. and that way maybe carry and robber gangs that way. And I'm looking that they are happening in like secret kind of like isolated areas over that kind of development. That way maybe carry as well as like the robber gang. So we being confused as to that what exactly happened and that so that they are them that without having any real intention of like the valuable, like them entering into like the valuable and then exploring like the valuable is like saying this scenario that I'm looking at. That way eventually clearing their own exploration in like the valuable then eventually ending up running into like the paranormal aspect. And that way until made like the and at that point, Cali may be using her big energy superpower against like the Shadow Monster. It's also like a possibility that I'm doing. And at that point, I'm just saying like maybe the Shadow Monster being so extremely pleased because through like the realization that like there are other individuals with like the very same power as 11 through which like the air can be created within like the real world. And that's what that way like the Shadow Monster straight away like maybe take the control of that Cali. Just like possibility that I'm going to say. That way, like the Shadow Monster controlling carry and usually creating like a bunch of players using that carry like a superpower in like the real world and bad world. And then maybe all that's happening in like the town of Illinois and basically like while 11 and all of them in the town of Illinois, you know, realizing all this about all this happening and about the maybe all those like chaos happening in isolated locations in like like the possibility that right. So like that way like by the time 11 and both like proper and this like will be realized about this like by then it's being filled late and the chaos being big enough filled and being greater in number to like the point of like this like situation for the of the time. So like proper and 11 and the field is like being for the scenario that I'm like and my possibility. Okay.